A Werewolf Shifter Romance. Written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Darkness and Chains. The ancient curse had stolen more than just Ava Whitmore's sight. It had condemned her to a life of shadows where light meant nothing, and hope was a luxury she could not afford. At 21, her world consisted of textures beneath her fingertips, scents carried on autumn winds, and the harsh voices of those who saw her blindness as divine punishment for sins she had never committed. The curse traced back 3 generations, a bitter legacy passed from mother to daughter in the Whitmore bloodline. Her grandmother had been the first. Struck blind the moment she bore a child, the village wise woman had whispered of forbidden magic, of a love affair with a dark sorcerer that had ended in betrayal and vengeance. Then her own mother, beautiful and kind Margaret Whitmore, had suffered the same fate when Ava drew her first breath 21 years ago. The village elders claimed it was the price of some forgotten transgression, a debt paid in darkness that would continue until the bloodline ended. Ava knelt on the cold stone floor of her uncle's kitchen, scrubbing pots with water that had long since turned murky and cold. Her hands, pale and scarred from years of hard labor, moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to navigate the world through touch alone. Every callus told a story of dropped dishes and burned fingers, of learning through pain what others took for granted. The harvest festival music drifted through the open windows, fiddles and drums painting pictures of joy she would never see. But it might as well have been mockery. She would not be joining the celebration. Omega servants, especially blind ones, had no place among the dancing and laughter of proper wolves. The kingdom of the wolves stretched far beyond her uncle's modest holding in Lord Aldrich's territory, a vast realm where shifters lived under ancient pack laws that governed everything from mating rights to territorial boundaries. Alpha King Constantine Ravenclaw ruled from his massive stone fortress, governing the lesser alphas who controlled individual territories throughout the realm. He had claimed the throne 5 years ago after his father's unexpected death in battle against northern raiders, and despite his youth at 29, he commanded absolute respect from the most powerful territorial lords down to the lowest Omega servants. But such lofty political concerns meant nothing to Ava. Her world was confined to these suffocating walls, to the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning and trying to remain invisible that filled her waking hours. She had been 9 years old when her parents died in a brutal rogue attack, their throats torn by savage wolves who had rejected pack law. She still remembered the metallic scent of blood, the way her mother's hand had gone limp in hers as they hid in the root cellar. Uncle Godwin had taken her in afterward, not out of familial love or even basic decency, but because even a blind Omega could serve some purpose as unpaid household labor. "Worthless creature!" her Aunt Meredith spat from across the kitchen, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Look at the mess you've made. Water everywhere, and now the floor will be slippery for hours." Ava's heart clenched painfully, but she bit back any response. She had learned long ago that defending herself only brought harsher punishments, longer days without food, more creative ways for them to express their disdain. Instead, she reached blindly for the worn cloth hanging by the basin, her movements careful and apologetic as always. "The bread is burning," Meredith shrieked suddenly, and Ava scrambled toward the stone oven. The heat hit her face in a wave, and she could smell the acrid scent of charred crust mixed with wasted grain. Her hands shook as she pulled the blackened loaves free with a wooden paddle, knowing that this mistake would cost her dinner and probably breakfast as well. Perfect bread required timing she couldn't manage without sight. But they expected miracles anyway. Through the open window, she could hear the celebration growing louder as darkness fell. Lord Aldrich Grimthorne was hosting the festival this year, his territory's wolves gathering to honor the harvest moon that would rise full and silver above the forest. There would be dancing and feasting, young wolves finding their destined mates under the ancient lunar blessing. Courting rituals that had remained unchanged for centuries would play out in torchlit gardens. It was everything Ava would never experience: connection, belonging, the fierce protective love that bound mated pairs together for life. Clumsy fool! Uncle Godwin's voice boomed from the doorway, making her flinch. His heavy boots crossed the kitchen floor with deliberate menace. Can't even manage simple bread without ruining it. Do you know how much grain costs? How many coins you've just thrown into the fire?" Ava bowed her head, long golden hair falling across her face in a curtain that hid her expression. "Forgive me, Uncle. I will be more careful. I'll work through the night to make fresh loaves." "Careful?" He laughed harshly, and she could hear the cruelty in it. "You're a burden, girl. Have been since the day we took pity on you. At least your parents had the decency to die quickly instead of lingering around like some cursed, useless thing that drains resources and gives nothing back." The words cut deeper than any physical blow, but Ava had heard worse over the years. She focused on the sharp pain in her knees from kneeling on unforgiving stone, using it to anchor herself against the emotional storm threatening to break her composure. She had learned that tears only encouraged them to push harder. "Sir Edmund was asking about available Omega servants at market today," Aunt Meredith said, her voice taking on that calculating tone Ava had learned to fear. "His household needs kitchen help. Someone who won't ask questions or expect proper wages. Perhaps it's time we considered other arrangements for our dear niece." Ava's blood turned to ice in her veins. Sir Edmund was notorious throughout the territory for his cruelty to servants, especially those who couldn't fight back or run away. She had heard whispered horror stories from traveling merchants about Omegas who entered his service and simply vanished, their fates unknown, but easily imagined. "The girl eats far too much for the work she provides," Godwin mused, his voice growing thoughtful in a way that terrified her. "And with winter approaching, we'll have enough mouths to feed without adding useless ones to the count. Please," Ava whispered, the desperate word escaping before she could stop it. "I can work harder. I'll eat less. Only scraps, I swear. I won't make mistakes like this again. Please don't send me away." The slap came without warning, sending her sprawling across the kitchen floor. Pain exploded across her left cheek, and she tasted copper where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. Stars burst behind her blind eyes. "Did I ask for your opinion, you worthless creature?" Godwin snarled, standing over her prone form. 12 years we've sheltered you out of Christian charity, fed you from our own table, and this is how you repay our kindness? With complaints and demands?" Ava pressed her palm to her burning cheek, fighting desperately against the tears that threatened to fall. 12 years of servitude, of grateful silence, of making herself as small and unnoticed as possible. 12 years of pretending their cruelty was kindness. Their abuse was care. And still it would never be enough. The festival music swirled through the night air outside, a cruel reminder of all the life and joy that existed beyond these suffocating walls. Somewhere out there, wolves were finding their destined mates, their other halves who would love and protect them with fierce devotion. Somewhere people were valued for more than just their ability to scrub floors and tend fires without complaint. But not here. Never here in this house of chains and cruelty. Ava Whitmore would remain what she had always been, a shadow in her own life, invisible and unwanted, carrying the weight of an ancient curse she had never earned and could never escape. The burned bread lay forgotten beside her as she curled into herself on the cold stone floor, wondering if tomorrow would finally be the day they decided she wasn't worth keeping at all. Outside, the harvest moon began its rise above the forest, casting silver light on celebrations she would never join, and freedoms she would never know. Chapter 2. Into the Wilderness. The festival's final song faded into the distance, as Ava pressed her back against the wooden door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Uncle Godwin's drunken snores echoed from the main room where he'd collapsed after returning from Lord Aldrich's celebration, reeking of ale and triumph. She had heard him talking with Aunt Meredith before he'd passed out. Arrangements had been made. Sir Edmund would collect his new servant before dawn. Ava's hands trembled as she gathered her few possessions, a worn cloak that had belonged to her mother, a small eating knife, and the tiny wooden wolf her father had carved for her 9th birthday. Everything else belonged to her uncle, payment for 12 years of reluctant charity. She wrapped the items in a scrap of cloth, knowing that whatever lay ahead in the dark forest couldn't be worse than what awaited her in Sir Edmund's household. The kitchen door creaked softly as she eased it open. Cool night air touched her face, carrying the scent of dying leaves and distant wood smoke. The harvest moon hung full overhead, its silver light meaningless to her blind eyes, but somehow comforting in its ancient presence. She had heard the old stories, how the moon goddess watched over lost souls, how wolves ran wild and free under her blessing. Ava stepped into the darkness she had known all her life. Her bare feet found the narrow path that led away from the village, stones sharp against her soles. She had walked this way before during errands, but never alone, never at night, never with the desperate urgency that drove her now. Behind her, the warm glow of hearth fires painted the world in shades she would never see. Ahead lay the ancient forest, where even brave wolves feared to venture alone. The path grew rougher as she moved farther from human habitation. Tree branches caught at her cloak and hair, thorns scraped against her arms, but she pressed forward. Fear was a cold weight in her stomach, but it paled beside the terror of remaining. At least here she had a choice in how she died. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time moved differently in the wilderness, measured not by clock towers, but by the rhythm of her footsteps and the gradual shift in the forest's sounds. Night creatures stirred in the undergrowth, small things that scurried away from her clumsy passage. An owl called from somewhere high above, its voice hollow and lonely. Then the path vanished. Ava stopped, panic rising in her throat as she felt around with her feet. The packed earth she had been following simply ended, leaving her surrounded by dense undergrowth and fallen logs. She must have missed a turn in the darkness, let her fear drive her away from the safety of known routes. Now she was truly lost, standing alone in a forest that stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. She forced herself to breathe slowly, drawing on years of learning to navigate by sound and scent. The air smelled of oak leaves and damp earth, with an underlying current of something wild and predatory. Water trickled somewhere to her left, a stream that might lead to a larger river, a landmark she could follow. She turned toward the sound, pushing through brambles that tore at her simple dress. The ground sloped downward, treacherous with loose stones and hidden roots. Ava moved carefully, testing each step, but exhaustion and terror made her clumsy. Her foot caught on something solid and she pitched forward, tumbling down a steep embankment in a tangle of limbs and torn fabric. Pain exploded through her left shoulder as she hit the bottom. She lay stunned for a moment, tasting blood where she had bitten her tongue. When she tried to sit up, agony shot through her arm. Not broken, she thought, but badly wrenched. Fresh tears stung her eyes as the reality of her situation crashed over her. Lost. Injured. Alone in a wilderness full of predators, both human and animal. She might survive the night if she found shelter, but come morning she would still be a blind Omega with nowhere to go. Maybe Sir Edmund's cruelty would have been a quicker death than slow starvation in the woods. The stream gurgled nearby, barely more than a trickle over stones. At least she wouldn't die of thirst immediately. Ava crawled toward the sound, her injured arm cradled against her chest, leaves and debris clinging to her torn dress. The water was ice cold when she cupped it in her good hand, shocking against her cut lips. She had just lowered her head to drink when she heard it, a low rumble that seemed to come from the very earth itself. Not quite a growl, but something deeper, more primal. The sound raised every hair on her arms and sent her wolf-born instincts screaming in alarm. Ava froze, water dripping from her fingers. Her breath came in shallow pants as she strained to listen. For a long moment there was only silence, the kind of absolute quiet that falls when every small creature suddenly stops moving. Even the stream seemed to flow more softly. Then she smelled it, musk and pine and something indefinably male, wild in a way that spoke of open sky and running free. The scent was strong, recent, approaching. Something large was moving through the undergrowth toward her hiding place by the water. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain it could be heard for miles. Wolves. It had to be wolves. Either shifters from one of the local packs, or true wild ones that had never learned human form. Either way, a lone Omega represented easy prey. She pressed herself against the muddy bank, trying to become invisible, knowing it was hopeless. Leaves rustled. Twigs snapped under massive weight. Whatever was approaching made no attempt at stealth. It didn't need to. Ava bit down on her good hand to keep from whimpering as the footsteps grew closer, circling her position with deliberate patience. When it finally appeared at the edge of her awareness, she knew immediately what faced her. The breathing was too deep, too controlled to belong to a wild animal. The scent carried hints of intelligence and purpose that spoke of a mind behind the predator's form. This was a shifter, and a large one. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "I'm not trespassing on purpose. I'm lost." The breathing stopped. For endless heartbeats, nothing moved, neither hunter nor prey. Then, slowly, deliberately, something huge settled onto the ground nearby. Not the cautious crouch of an animal preparing to strike, but the measured movement of a being choosing to wait. Ava remained frozen, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes passed in suffocating silence before curiosity finally overcame terror. Whatever this creature was, it hadn't attacked yet. Perhaps it was simply curious about the strange human who had stumbled into its territory. "I won't hurt you," she said softly, feeling foolish for speaking to what might be a wild animal. "I know you could kill me easily. I don't want to die alone in the dark." A soft sound answered her. Not quite a whine, but something gentler than a growl. Almost sympathetic. Ava felt tears spill down her cheeks as exhaustion and despair finally overwhelmed her fragile composure. "I don't have anywhere to go," she continued, her voice breaking. "They were going to sell me to someone terrible, and I ran. But I don't know how to survive out here. I can't see, and I'm hurt, and I'm so scared." The confession hung in the air between them. Ava waited for the killing strike, the brutal end to her short and miserable life. Instead, she felt warmth brush against her uninjured hand, something soft and thick. Fur, she realized with shock. The wolf was close enough to touch, near enough to smell the wildness that clung to its coat. Slowly, hardly breathing, she let her fingers trace along what felt like a massive head. The fur was coarser than she had expected, thick and slightly damp from the night air. Beneath it, she could feel the solid bone structure of a skull, larger than any natural wolf should possess. This was definitely a shifter, and a powerful one. The great beast remained perfectly still under her tentative exploration, allowing her touch with a patience that spoke of intelligence, and perhaps even compassion. When her fingers found the curve of its ear, the wolf leaned slightly into the contact, as if drawing comfort from the gentle connection. "You're beautiful," Ava whispered, wonder replacing fear in her voice. "I wish I could see you properly." A soft rumble answered her, almost like a purr. The wolf shifted position, and she felt something brush against her torn dress. A nose, she thought, sniffing carefully at her injuries. The touch was clinical, assessing, as if the creature was evaluating her condition. Then, without warning, it rose and moved away. Panic flared in Ava's chest as she heard it retreating through the undergrowth. She was alone again, abandoned by the only being that had shown her kindness in longer than she could remember. "Wait," she called softly, but there was no answer, save the renewed rustle of small creatures emerging from hiding. Ava curled into herself beside the stream, cradling her injured arm and trying not to despair. Perhaps the wolf would return. Perhaps morning would bring rescue instead of death. Or perhaps she would simply fade away here in the wilderness, forgotten and unmourned. But for the first time in years, she had felt a connection to another living being. That strange, wild creature had chosen gentleness over violence, curiosity over cruelty. Whatever happened next, she would hold that memory close. The moon continued its journey across the star-filled sky, bearing witness to one lost soul's first taste of something that might, in time, grow into hope. Chapter 3. Guardian of the Forest. Dawn crept through the forest canopy in shades of gray and gold that Ava could only sense through the gradual warming of her skin and the awakening chorus of birdsong. She had dozed fitfully against the stream bank, her injured arm throbbing with each heartbeat, dreams full of amber eyes and gentle touches that felt too real to be imagination. A soft thud nearby brought her fully awake. Something had been placed on the ground beside her. She could hear the subtle shift of leaves, smell the rich scent of cooked meat. Her stomach clenched with desperate hunger as she reached out cautiously, her fingers encountering warm fur, and then something wrapped within it. Fresh rabbit, skillfully cleaned and still warm from recent cooking. Beside it, a collection of late-season berries and what felt like edible roots. The wolf had returned while she slept, bringing food like some legendary forest guardian from the old stories her mother used to tell. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty air, tears of gratitude sliding down her cheeks. She ate slowly, savoring each bite of the most delicious meal she had tasted in years. No cruel words accompanied this food, no demands for gratitude or threats of its removal. It was given freely, without conditions. As she finished eating, she became aware of a presence watching from the undergrowth, not threatening, but attentive, as if her mysterious protector was ensuring she recovered properly. The scent was the same as the night before, pine and musk and wild freedom, but somehow more complex in daylight, layers of something that spoke to instincts she didn't fully understand. "Are you there?" she asked softly. A branch rustled in response, and she heard the careful placement of massive paws on forest floor. "I don't understand why you're helping me, but I'm grateful. More grateful than I can ever express." The sound of movement grew closer, and then she felt that familiar presence settling nearby. Not quite touching, but close enough that she could hear steady breathing, could smell the wildness that clung to thick fur. There was something deeply comforting about the wolf's proximity, as if some part of her recognized safety in its presence. "I've never met a shifter who stayed in wolf form so long," Ava continued, needing to fill the silence with words. "The few I've seen in the village always seemed eager to return to human shape. Do you prefer being a wolf? It must be wonderful, running free through the forest, never having to worry about closed doors and cruel masters." A soft sound answered her, almost like agreement. She sensed movement, and then felt warm breath against her face as the great head moved closer. Cautiously, she lifted her good hand, fingers brushing against the thick fur of its muzzle. The wolf held perfectly still, allowing the contact with remarkable patience. "You're larger than any wolf I've heard described," she murmured, marveling at the size of the head beneath her palm. "You must be from a very powerful bloodline. An alpha, perhaps? That would explain the intelligence in your eyes. Not that I can see them, but I can feel it." The wolf made a sound deep in its chest. Neither growl nor whine, but something more complex. Almost conversational, as if it was trying to communicate something important. Ava found herself smiling for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I wish I understood what you're trying to tell me," she said. "I wish I could see you properly, see the forest you call home. It must be beautiful here." Without warning, the wolf rose and moved away. Ava's heart sank, thinking she had somehow offended her protector, but then she heard purposeful movement through the undergrowth. Branches being pushed aside, the scrape of something heavy being dragged. When the sound stopped, warm fur brushed against her shoulder, an invitation to rise. Ava struggled to her feet, favoring her injured arm, and felt a gentle pressure against her good side. The wolf was offering itself as support, guiding her somewhere with careful steps. She rested her hand on the thick fur of its back, amazed by the trust implied in the gesture. "Where are we going?" she asked, but received only that patient guidance in response. They moved slowly through the forest, the wolf leading her around obstacles she couldn't see, pausing whenever she stumbled or needed to rest. The care it took with her limitations was remarkable, as if it understood her blindness and was determined to protect her from harm. After what felt like an hour of careful travel, they stopped. The wolf moved away from her side, and she heard the distinctive sound of a door creaking open on old hinges. Wood and metal, human construction in the heart of the wilderness. "A cabin," she breathed, reaching out to feel rough-hewn timber walls. Her fingers traced the doorframe, exploring this unexpected sanctuary. "You brought me to shelter." The wolf made an encouraging sound, and she felt its bulk brush past her as it entered the structure. Following cautiously, Ava discovered a single room furnished with basic necessities. A stone fireplace, rough wooden furniture, what felt like a simple cot covered with thick furs. The air smelled of old smoke and cedar, with underlying notes of human habitation from some previous occupant. A hunter's cabin, she realized aloud. Abandoned, but still sound. This is perfect shelter. She turned toward where she thought the wolf might be standing. "You knew about this place. You brought me here deliberately." Movement in the corner, the soft sound of settling weight. Her guardian had claimed a spot where it could watch both her and the door. Protective positioning that spoke of military training or natural alpha instincts. The care it showed was far beyond simple animal compassion. As the day wore on, Ava explored her new sanctuary by touch. The cabin was better stocked than she had dared hope. Dried herbs hanging from the rafters, a few preserved foods in sealed containers, even a cache of firewood stacked against one wall. Someone had used this place regularly, though not recently. The wolf remained her constant companion, moving around the cabin with familiar ease. It brought her fresh water from a nearby spring, guided her to useful supplies, even seemed to understand when she needed privacy for personal necessities. The intelligence behind its actions was unmistakable. "You've been here before," she said as evening approached. She sat on the cot, her injured arm finally beginning to feel better after a day of rest. "This isn't just random shelter you stumbled across. You know this place." The wolf approached slowly, and she felt the cot dip as it settled beside her. The warmth of its large body was comforting against the growing chill of night. When she reached out tentatively, her hand encountered thick fur over powerful muscles. The wolf leaned into her touch, a rumble of contentment vibrating through its chest. "I still don't understand why you're helping me," Ava whispered, stroking the soft fur behind its ears. "I'm nobody special. Just a cursed Omega with nowhere to go. Most wolves would have left me to die in the forest." The response was immediate and unmistakable. A gentle pressure, as the great head nudged against her hand, followed by what could only be described as a wolf's attempt at a comforting sound. Not pity, but something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. As if this magnificent creature saw something in her that she couldn't see in herself. "Whatever your reasons, I'm grateful," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "For the first time in my life, I feel safe, protected, like someone actually cares whether I live or die." The wolf shifted position, and she felt warmth against her side as it settled closer. Not threatening or presumptuous, but offering comfort in the most basic way possible. Shared warmth and presence. The simple gesture broke something loose in Ava's chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. For 12 years, she had lived without gentleness, without anyone who cared about her well-being. Now this mysterious wolf, this creature who owed her nothing, was offering the kind of protection and care she had only dreamed of. It was almost too much to bear. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for showing me that kindness still exists in the world." The wolf's response was a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and the settling weight of a large head coming to rest near her feet. Guardian and protected, predator and prey, finding an impossible peace in the depths of an ancient forest. As sleep claimed her, Ava could have sworn she heard something that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby. Low, melodic sounds that seemed to come from her protector's throat. But that was impossible, she told herself drowsily. Wolves didn't sing. But then again, she was learning that many things she had thought impossible were simply waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves as truth. Chapter 4. Constantine's Truth. The third morning in the cabin brought an unexpected discovery that changed everything. Ava had awakened before dawn, as was her habit, listening to the familiar sounds of her guardian stirring in the corner. But instead of the usual soft patting of wolf paws, she heard something else entirely. The quiet crackle of a fire being kindled. The deliberate placement of human feet on wooden floors. She lay perfectly still on the cot, heart racing, as the impossible became reality. Her protector was moving around the cabin in human form, believing her still asleep. The sounds were unmistakably those of a man going about morning tasks, adding wood to the fire, moving water containers, arranging supplies with careful efficiency. "I know you're awake," a deep voice said suddenly, rich and warm with traces of an accent she couldn't place. "Your breathing changed several minutes ago." Ava's breath caught in her throat. After 3 days of silence save for wolf sounds, hearing actual words was startling enough. But the voice itself sent an unexpected shiver through her, commanding yet gentle, with undertones that seemed to resonate in her very bones. "Don't be afraid," the voice continued, closer now. "I'm still the same one who's been watching over you. I just needed hands to prepare proper food." Slowly, Ava sat up on the cot, pulling the fur covering closer around her shoulders. You can speak. A soft laugh answered her. Among other things, yes. My name is Constantine. I should have introduced myself properly days ago, but I wasn't certain you'd accept help from a strange man as readily as you did from a wolf. Constantine, she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It suited the voice. Strong, foreign, carrying hints of distant lands and royal bloodlines. That's not a common name in these parts. No, it isn't. She heard him moving around the cabin, and the rich scent of cooking meat began to fill the air. I'm from the Northern Territories originally. I was traveling through this forest when I found you by the stream. There was something carefully neutral in his tone, as if he was choosing his words with deliberate precision. Ava had learned to read voices for the truths they tried to hide, and this man was definitely not telling her everything. But then, neither had she shared her full story with him. Why were you traveling in wolf form? She asked, genuinely curious. Most shifters prefer human shape for long journeys. A pause in his movements. I was injured, he said finally. Ambushed by rogues several days before I found you. Wolf form heals faster, and it's less conspicuous for a lone traveler. That explained the careful way he had moved on that first night, the protective positioning she had sensed. A wounded shifter would be extremely cautious around strangers, and yet he had chosen to help her despite his own vulnerability. You could have left me to die, Ava said quietly. Most would have. A blind Omega isn't exactly valuable to anyone. Don't. The word came out sharper than he apparently intended, because his next words were gentler. Don't speak of yourself that way. You have value that has nothing to do with your sight or your pack status. The conviction in his voice startled her. You don't know anything about me. I know you've survived something terrible enough to drive you into the wilderness alone. I know you have courage most wolves twice your size would envy. I know you speak to lost creatures with kindness even when you're terrified yourself. The sounds of cooking continued as he spoke. Those things matter more than whether you can see or what the pack hierarchy says about your worth. Warmth spread through Ava's chest at his words. When was the last time anyone had spoken of her with such respect? You sound like you know something about surviving terrible things yourself. Another pause. We all have our scars, Constantine said quietly. Some are just more visible than others. The food he prepared was far superior to anything she had eaten in the cabin so far. Meat seasoned with wild herbs, roots roasted to perfection, even a kind of tea brewed from forest plants. As she ate, Constantine settled somewhere across the room, far enough away to avoid making her uncomfortable, but close enough for conversation. Tell me about the forest, Ava requested, suddenly hungry for descriptions of the world she couldn't see. What does it look like here? Ancient, he said immediately. These trees have stood for centuries, some of them. The canopy is so thick it creates its own twilight world underneath, all green shadows and shafts of golden light. There's moss on everything, thick as velvet, and the air itself seems to shimmer with magic. His voice took on a poetic quality as he continued, painting pictures with words that were almost as good as sight. He described the way morning mist curled through the valleys, how autumn colors painted the distant hillsides in shades of fire, the crystal clarity of streams that had never known human pollution. You speak like a scholar, Ava observed, or a nobleman. Your education shows in your words. Does it? There was amusement in his voice. I suppose I've read more books than most hunters and trappers. Is that what you are, a hunter? Among other things. That careful neutrality again. I've had many occupations over the years. Currently, I'm between commitments. Ava sensed there was much more to his story, but she didn't press. Everyone was entitled to their secrets, and Constantine had already shown her more kindness than she had any right to expect. As the day progressed, she found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't thought possible. Constantine's presence was soothing, his voice a constant comfort as he moved about the cabin. He described everything he was doing, gathering firewood, checking their food supplies, maintaining their shelter, as if understanding that knowledge was its own form of security for someone who couldn't see. But it was more than just his consideration for her blindness. There was something about Constantine himself that called to parts of Ava she had thought long dead, the way he spoke to her as an equal, rather than a burden. the obvious intelligence behind his observations, the underlying strength in his voice that suggested a man comfortable with command, yet gentle enough to care for a wounded stranger. "Why haven't you left?" she asked, as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. "Your injuries must be healed by now. You could continue on to wherever you were traveling." The question hung in the air for a long moment before he answered. "I'm not certain you're ready to be alone yet. Your arm is better, but you're still recovering from whatever drove you into the forest. And besides," his voice grew softer, "I find myself reluctant to leave." "Reluctant? I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted things from me," Constantine said carefully. "Power, influence, favors. You're the first person in years who simply accepts my presence without expecting anything in return. It's refreshing." There was a loneliness in his words that resonated deep in Ava's chest. Here was a man who clearly had status and position. His education and bearing made that obvious. Yet he felt isolated in ways she understood all too well. "I'm the one who should be grateful," she said softly. "You saved my life." "We saved each other," he corrected. "I was injured and alone when I found you. Caring for someone else gave me purpose, helped me heal faster than I would have on my own." As evening approached, Constantine announced he needed to scout their surroundings, check for any signs of danger. "I'll be back before full dark," he promised. "Will you be all right alone for a few hours?" "I've been alone most of my life," Ava replied, though the thought of losing his company even temporarily filled her with unexpected anxiety. "I'll manage." She heard him pause at the doorway. "Ava?" "Yes? I want you to know, whatever decisions you make about your future, wherever you choose to go from here, you won't face it completely alone. I'll make sure you have options beyond returning to whatever situation drove you into these woods." The promise wrapped around her heart, unexpected and precious. "Thank you, Constantine, for everything." When he left, the cabin felt impossibly empty despite its small size. Ava found herself listening for his return, counting the minutes until she would hear his voice again. It was dangerous, this growing attachment to a man she barely knew. But for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand what it might feel like to matter to someone. Outside, unknown to her, the man she knew as Constantine stood in the gathering dusk and wrestled with truths he couldn't yet reveal. Alpha King Constantine Ravenclaw, ruler of all the wolf territories, had found something in this forest far more precious than the political alliance he had been traveling to secure. He had found his mate, and he had absolutely no idea how to tell her who he really was. Chapter 5. Revelations of Blood and Crown. The morning of their 6th day together began with a truth that would shatter the fragile peace they had built. Constantine had been restless all night, his internal struggle between duty and desire finally reaching a breaking point. As dawn painted the forest in shades Ava would never see, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Ava," he said quietly, kneeling beside the cot where she still rested. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have revealed days ago." She turned toward his voice, instantly alert to the tension in his tone. "What is it?" Constantine took a deep breath, the sound heavy with the weight of secrets too long carried. "I'm not entirely human, as you know, but what you don't know is the extent of what I am." He paused, gathering courage for words that would either bind them together or drive her away forever. "And you deserve the truth." Something in his voice made Ava's heart skip. "Who are you, Constantine?" Instead of answering with words, Constantine let the change take him. Ava heard the familiar sounds of transformation, the cracking of bones, the rustle of fur replacing skin, the soft thud of human form becoming something far larger and more powerful. When the sound ceased, she knew without touching that the great black wolf sat before her once again. "My protector," she whispered, wonder filling her voice as understanding dawned. "You were always both, human and wolf, caring for me in whatever form I needed most." The wolf made a soft sound of agreement, and then the change reversed. Constantine's human voice returned, closer now, as if he had moved toward her during the transformation. "There's more," he said, his tone careful and measured. "The reason I was traveling through these forests, why I was attacked by rogues, why I must leave soon despite every instinct telling me to stay. Ava felt a chill of premonition. Tell me. I'm not just any shifter, Ava. He stopped, the words catching in his throat as if speaking them would make his greatest fears reality. You're an alpha, she said softly. I can hear it in your voice, in the way you carry yourself, the authority that comes naturally to you. More than that, Constantine's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm the Alpha King. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that made Ava's head spin. The Alpha King, Constantine Ravenclaw, ruler of all the wolf territories, the most powerful shifter in the known world. And he had been here, in this humble cabin, caring for a blind Omega who had nothing to offer him. That's impossible, she breathed, even as part of her recognized the truth in his confession. It explained so much. His education, his manner of speaking, the careful way he had chosen his words about his past. I know how it sounds, Constantine said urgently. I know what you must be thinking, but Ava, everything I've felt for you, everything we've shared here, none of that was about duty or politics. You have to believe that. Feel for me? The words came out as a question, though her heart already knew the answer. She had felt it too. The growing connection that went beyond gratitude or simple companionship. From the moment I found you by that stream, something in me recognized something in you. Not just attraction, though. That's certainly part of it. Something deeper, more fundamental. His voice grew rough with emotion. Ava, I know you're my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. The bond that connected two souls across all boundaries of status or circumstance. The connection she had felt, but been too afraid to name. No, she whispered. Not in denial, but in despair. You can't mean that. I do mean it. Every word. She heard him move closer, felt the warmth of his presence. I've spent 6 years on the throne, meeting potential queens from every important bloodline in the kingdom. None of them made me feel even a fraction of what I experienced just hearing your voice. Tears began to flow down Ava's cheeks. You're the Alpha King. I'm a blind Omega who was cast out by her own family. Even if what you say is true, even if I am your mate, it would never work. The kingdom would never accept. The kingdom will accept what I tell them to accept. Constantine interrupted, his voice taking on the command that had cowed lesser alphas for years. My father ruled for 30 years with a mate who started as a common village healer. Love matters more than bloodlines. But I can't see, Ava protested. I can't give you the kind of queen the kingdom needs. I can't. You can do everything that matters, Constantine said fiercely. You have wisdom, compassion, strength that has nothing to do with physical sight. You've survived things that would have broken nobles who claim superior breeding. Before Ava could respond, she felt gentle fingers touch her face, tracing the path of her tears. May I? Constantine asked softly. May I show you what you mean to me? Ava nodded, unable to speak. She felt him lean closer, his breath warm against her face. And then his lips touched hers with infinite tenderness. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, she found herself leaning into the contact, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. The moment their lips met, something electric passed between them. Ava gasped at the sensation, as if lightning had just illuminated her entire world. For one impossible instant, she could swear she saw something. Not with her eyes, but through some deeper sense. Amber eyes looking down at her with desperate love, a face carved with strength and authority, but softened by tenderness. Constantine, she breathed against his lips, and he made a sound deep in his throat that was part growl, part prayer. My mate, he whispered back. My queen, if you'll have me. They kissed again, deeper this time, both of them pouring weeks of unspoken longing into the connection. Ava had never known that touch could communicate so much, that a simple kiss could convey emotions too complex for words. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Constantine rested his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face as if she were the most precious thing in existence. What happens now? Ava asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Now we figure out how to make this work, Constantine said firmly. I won't lose you, Ava. Not to politics, not to protocol, not to anything. But you have duties, responsibilities to your kingdom. My greatest responsibility is to be happy. Constantine replied. A king who rules without love in his heart can never truly serve his people. You've shown me what I've been missing, what I need to be whole. They spent the morning talking, sharing fears and hopes they had never spoken aloud. Constantine told her about the loneliness of the throne, the burden of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Ava spoke of her dreams, the life she had imagined before accepting that such things were beyond her reach. It was just past midday when the sound of approaching horses shattered their intimate peace. Many horses, moving with the precision of a military patrol. Constantine was on his feet instantly, his entire body tensing with alertness. "Stay here," he commanded, alpha authority making his voice irresistible. "Whatever happens, don't leave this cabin until I return. Constantine, wait." But he was already moving, stepping out into the clearing beyond the cabin door. Ava heard voices, formal and respectful, addressing someone as Your Majesty. Her blood turned cold as she realized what was happening. Lord Aldrich. Constantine's voice carried clearly through the open door. "I wasn't expecting a search party. Your Majesty disappeared from Lord Edmund's territory 6 days ago," came the reply, in a voice Ava recognized with growing dread. Lord Aldrich Grimthorne, the territorial ruler who had hosted the harvest festival. "We've been searching the forests day and night. The kingdom has been in chaos without its leader. As you can see, I'm perfectly safe," Constantine replied. But Ava could hear the tension in his voice. "I was delayed by the rogue attack I reported, but I've been recovering." "Of course, Your Majesty. We're simply relieved to find you unharmed." There was something in Lord Aldrich's tone that made Ava's skin crawl. Too smooth, too calculated. "We should return to the castle immediately. There are urgent matters requiring your attention." A long pause. Then Constantine's voice, heavy with resignation. "Very well. Give me a moment to gather my things." Ava heard him approach the cabin, felt his presence fill the doorway. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "I have to go with them." "But this isn't over, Ava. I swear to you this isn't the end." "I know," she whispered, though her heart was breaking. "You're the king. Your people need you. My people include you now." Constantine said fiercely, "You're coming with us." "What?" Ava's voice came out as a squeak. "You have nowhere else to go, and I won't leave you alone in the forest again. You'll come to the castle as my guest." She heard the careful pause, knew he was editing his words for the benefit of listening ears outside. Before she could protest, she heard Lord Aldrich's voice from the clearing. "Your Majesty, is there some problem?" "No problem," Constantine called back. "Simply ensuring that a lost traveler I encountered receives proper care. She'll be accompanying us to the castle." Ava's hands shook as she gathered her few possessions. Everything was happening too fast. The simple peace of their forest sanctuary shattered by the return of politics and protocol. As Constantine helped her from the cabin, she heard Lord Aldrich's sharp intake of breath. "Your Majesty," the Lord said, his voice carefully neutral. "Surely it would be more appropriate to leave the person at the nearest village. The castle is no place for subjects who require my protection." Constantine's voice carried the unmistakable edge of royal displeasure. "I think I'm the best judge of what is and isn't appropriate for my own castle, Lord Aldrich." As they prepared to leave, Ava noticed the way Lord Aldrich's attention seemed focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. There was something calculating in his silence, as if he was storing information for future use. The journey to Constantine's castle would be the longest ride of her life, carrying her toward a destiny she had never imagined. But as Constantine helped her onto a horse, his hands gentle and reassuring, she held on to his promise that this was just the beginning of their story, not the end. The Alpha King had claimed his mate. Now they would have to fight the entire world to keep each other. Chapter 6. Among Wolves and Whispers. The royal castle rose from the mountainside like something from the ancient legends, its massive stone walls telling stories of centuries past in their weathered surfaces. Ava could feel its immensity even without sight. The way sound echoed differently in the vast courtyard, the cool shadows cast by towers that must stretch toward the clouds, the bustling energy of hundreds of people going about their daily lives within its walls. "Welcome to Ravenclaw Keep," Constantine murmured as he helped her down from her horse. His hands lingered on her waist, the touch both reassuring and possessive. Home of the Alpha Kings for 12 generations. The journey from the forest had taken 2 days, and throughout it all, Ava had been acutely aware of Lord Aldrich's calculating gaze. He rode near the front of their party, close enough to observe but far enough to maintain plausible politeness. She could feel his attention whenever Constantine showed her any courtesy, sense his mind working behind those cold green eyes. "Your Majesty," came a warm female voice as they approached the main entrance. "Thank the moon goddess you're safe. The entire castle has been in upheaval since word came of the rogue attack." "Thank you, Elena," Constantine replied, and Ava could hear genuine affection in his tone. "Is my study prepared? I imagine there are urgent matters requiring attention." "Indeed there are, Your Majesty. But first, perhaps you should know that Lord Edmund has been asking questions about a missing Omega servant from his territory. Apparently, she fled her household the night of the Harvest Festival." Ava's blood turned cold. Somehow, her escape had reached even here, to the highest levels of the kingdom. Beside her, she felt Constantine tense. "How unfortunate for Lord Edmund," the king said carefully. "I trust he's recovered from this loss." "He seemed quite concerned about retrieving his property," Elena continued, and there was something in her voice that suggested she found such concern suspicious. "Offered a substantial reward for information about her whereabouts." "Property." The word came out of Constantine like a growl. "Elena, please ensure that Lady Ava is given appropriate quarters in the East Wing. She'll be staying as my personal guest for the foreseeable future." "Lady Ava?" Elena's voice carried clear surprise, though she quickly covered it with professional courtesy. "Of course, Your Majesty. I'll see to her comfort immediately." As servants bustled around them, Ava found herself guided through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The castle was alive with energy, conversations echoing from distant chambers, the soft pad of feet on stone floors, the subtle sense that marked this as a place where powerful shifters lived and worked. "This will be your chamber," Elena said, opening a door that creaked on ancient hinges. "I've taken the liberty of having suitable clothes prepared, and meals will be brought at your convenience." The room was warm and comfortable, furnished with pieces that felt expensive beneath her exploring fingers. A large bed with soft linens, chairs positioned near what must be a fireplace, even a small table set with delicate porcelain. "This is too fine," Ava protested. "You're the king's guest," Elena interrupted gently. "That makes you deserving of our finest hospitality. Is there anything specific you require? Assistance with anything?" The delicate pause made it clear that Elena had noticed her blindness, but was too well trained to mention it directly. "I can manage," Ava said quietly, "but thank you for your kindness." "His Majesty has requested that you join him for dinner in his private dining room," Elena continued. "I'll return to escort you when it's time." When she was finally alone, Ava sank into one of the soft chairs and tried to process the magnitude of her situation. Yesterday she had been a forest refugee sleeping on fur blankets. Today she was a guest in the most powerful castle in the kingdom, wearing silk and eating from golden plates. But beneath the luxury, she sensed danger. Too many people were interested in a blind Omega who should have been invisible. Lord Aldrich's calculating stares, Lord Edmund's substantial reward, even Elena's carefully neutral responses. All of it suggested she had become a piece in a game whose rules she didn't understand. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. "Come in," she called, expecting Elena's return. "Lady Ava?" The voice was male, unfamiliar, with the careful deference of a professional servant. "I'm Marcus, His Majesty's personal aide. He asked me to inform you that dinner has been moved to his private study. He thought you might be more comfortable in a smaller, quieter setting." Relief flooded through her. "That's very considerate. Will you escort me there?" "Of course, my lady." The study was indeed more intimate than she had expected. The scents of leather-bound books and burning wood created a welcoming atmosphere, and she could hear the soft crackle of a fire in the hearth. Constantine rose as she entered, his familiar presence immediately putting her at ease. "How are you finding the castle?" he asked, guiding her to a chair positioned near his own. I know it must be overwhelming after the forest. It's magnificent, Ava said honestly, but also rather frightening. I've never been anywhere so grand. You belong here, Constantine said firmly. Never doubt that. They ate in comfortable conversation, Constantine describing the various dishes as they were served, and sharing stories about the castle's history. For a brief while, it felt almost like their time in the cabin. Intimate, peaceful, removed from the complexities of the world outside. Constantine, Ava said as the meal wound down, I need to ask you something, and I need your honest answer. Always. Am I in danger here? There are undercurrents I don't understand. People paying attention to me who shouldn't care about one blind Omega. What aren't you telling me? Constantine was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with concern. Lord Aldrich has been ambitious lately. There have been whispers about his loyalty, questions about whether he's entirely satisfied with the current order of things. Your sudden appearance, the obvious connection between us. It gives him potential leverage. Leverage for what? For challenging my right to rule without a queen. For suggesting that my judgment is compromised by inappropriate attachments. Constantine's voice grew tight with anger. The kingdom has laws about royal marriages, protocols that must be followed. If he can prove that I'm neglecting my duties for personal reasons, then I should leave, Ava said immediately. I won't be the reason you lose your throne. No, the word came out with absolute finality. I won't send you back into danger, Ava. And I certainly won't give up the best thing that's ever happened to me because of political maneuvering. Before she could respond, there was a sharp knock at the study door. Enter! Constantine called, his voice taking on the formal tone of command. Your Majesty, came Marcus's voice, tight with barely concealed alarm. Lord Aldrich requests an immediate audience. He says it's a matter of kingdom security. At this hour, Constantine's chair scraped back as he stood. Very well. Show him in. Your Majesty. Lord Aldrich's smooth voice filled the room as he entered. I apologize for the late hour, but I've received disturbing information that requires immediate attention. What information? Constantine's voice was carefully neutral, but Ava could sense the tension radiating from him. Reports of a missing Omega from Lord Edmund's territory. Apparently she fled during the Harvest Festival, and there are concerns about outside influences encouraging her defection. Some are suggesting she may have been aided by enemies of the crown. The accusation hung in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Ava felt her heart begin to race as she realized the trap that was closing around them. Interesting, Constantine said mildly. And what does this have to do with kingdom security? Well, Your Majesty, if hostile forces are indeed encouraging rebellion among the servant classes, it could represent a significant threat to stability. The Omega in question would need to be questioned naturally, returned to her proper place to discourage others from similar, unfortunate decisions. Naturally, Constantine's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. And you've brought this to my personal attention because, Your Majesty, I believe the missing Omega may currently be residing within these very walls. The statement landed between them with the force of a thrown gauntlet. Ava felt the room's atmosphere change, becoming charged with the kind of tension that preceded either violence or political catastrophe. That's a very serious accusation, Lord Aldrich, Constantine said quietly. I trust you have evidence to support such a claim? The evidence of my own eyes, Your Majesty. The young woman you brought from the forest bears a striking resemblance to the descriptions we've received. Blind, blonde, approximately 21 years of age. The coincidence seems unlikely. Ava's mouth went dry. Somehow, Lord Aldrich had connected her to Lord Edmund's missing property. But how? And more importantly, what did he intend to do with that knowledge? Even if your identification is correct, Constantine said carefully. The woman is under my protection. She's requested sanctuary, which is her right under kingdom law. Of course, Your Majesty, but surely you understand the delicate position this places you in. Housing a fugitive Omega, showing her such particular attention. There are protocols for these situations, proper channels that should be followed. The threat was clear now. Lord Aldrich was prepared to use Ava's presence as a weapon against Constantine, challenging his authority and judgment in front of the entire court. And the worst part was, he was probably within his legal rights to do so. "I see," Constantine said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And what would you suggest, Lord Aldrich? Perhaps it would be best if the young woman were questioned privately, her story verified, her loyalties confirmed. I would be happy to oversee such an investigation personally." Ava's blood turned to ice. She might not understand all the political implications, but she understood threat when she heard it. Lord Aldrich wanted her alone, wanted her away from Constantine's protection, wanted her vulnerable to whatever methods he deemed necessary to get the answers he sought. "I appreciate your concern for kingdom security," Constantine said, his tone suggesting anything but appreciation. "However, I believe I'm quite capable of handling this matter personally. The young woman will remain under my direct protection while I conduct my own investigation." "Of course, Your Majesty. But perhaps it would be wise to move quickly. Lord Edmund has many allies, and they're growing restless about the delay in recovering his property. Some might question whether the crown is truly committed to upholding the rights of territorial lords." With that parting shot, Lord Aldrich bowed and withdrew, leaving behind a silence heavy with unspoken threats and political calculations. Ava sat frozen in her chair, finally understanding the true extent of the danger she had brought to Constantine's door. "What have I done?" she whispered. "You've done nothing wrong," Constantine said fiercely, moving to kneel beside her chair. "But Lord Aldrich has just declared war, and you're caught in the middle of it." Outside the study windows, storm clouds gathered over the castle, promising a night of thunder and lightning that would pale beside the tempest brewing within the ancient walls of Ravenclaw Keep. Chapter 7. Fire and Truth. The great hall of Ravenclaw Keep had witnessed countless ceremonies over the centuries, but none quite like the one unfolding on this storm-lashed evening. What had begun as a formal dinner to welcome visiting lords had transformed into something far more dangerous, a public challenge to the crown itself. Ava stood at Constantine's side on the raised dais, acutely aware of every whisper, every sharp intake of breath that rippled through the assembled nobility. 3 days had passed since Lord Aldrich's thinly veiled threats. 3 days of growing tension as word spread through the castle about the mysterious Omega who had captured their king's attention. "My lords and ladies," Constantine's voice rang out across the hall, carrying the absolute authority of 6 years on the throne. "Tonight, we gather not just to feast, but to witness the bonds that make us strong as a kingdom." Ava felt his hand find hers, warm and steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to face. Since arriving at the castle, something had been awakening within her, a sensitivity to the emotions and intentions of the shifters around her that went far beyond normal Omega instincts. The great hall thrummed with power, dozens of alpha and beta wolves gathered in one space, and she could feel every undercurrent of loyalty, ambition, and barely controlled aggression. "Your Majesty." Lord Aldrich's voice cut through the formal atmosphere from his place at the high table. "Before we proceed with the evening's festivities, perhaps we should address the matter we discussed. The question of the fugitive currently enjoying royal protection." A murmur ran through the crowd. Ava sensed heads turning, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin raised, drawing strength from Constantine's unwavering presence beside her. "Indeed," Constantine replied smoothly. "Let us address that matter directly." He turned slightly, his voice projecting to every corner of the hall. "Lady Ava Whitmore stands before you tonight not as a fugitive, but as my chosen mate." The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. Gasps of shock, chairs scraping back as lords rose to their feet, urgent whispers exploding into heated conversations. Through it all, Ava felt the shift in the room's energy, the way political calculations recalibrated in an instant. "Your Majesty!" Lord Edmund's voice rose above the din, sharp with outrage. "That woman is my property. She fled her lawful service without permission, violated her contracted obligations. I demand her immediate return." "You demand?" Constantine's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet that somehow carried further than a shout. "You forget yourself, Edmund. No person in this kingdom is property, least of all my future queen. Future queen? Lord Aldrich stood, his face a mask of calculated concern. Your Majesty, with the greatest respect, surely such a momentous decision requires the counsel of the Royal Council. The protocols for royal marriage. The protocols, Constantine interrupted, state that an alpha king may choose his mate according to the bonds recognized by the moon goddess herself. I need no council's permission to claim what is already mine by divine right. Ava felt the change in him as he spoke, sensed the shift from human diplomat to something more primal. The alpha power that normally stayed carefully controlled began to bleed into his voice, commanding submission from every wolf in the hall. But Your Majesty, another voice called out. Lord Gareth, she thought, based on the accent. The woman is blind. How can a queen who cannot see properly serve the kingdom? How can she what? The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees as Constantine's anger blazed higher. How can she show wisdom? Compassion? The strength to survive persecution and still show kindness to strangers? Because I assure you, gentlemen, she possesses all of those qualities in abundance. She's cursed, Lord Edmund snarled, abandoning all pretense at diplomacy. The entire bloodline is cursed. Her grandmother, her mother, now her, all struck blind as punishment for some ancient sin. You would bring that darkness to the royal line? It was then that Ava felt it. The surge of something powerful awakening deep within her chest. Not just the mate bond she shared with Constantine, but something else, something uniquely her own. The emotions of every person in the hall suddenly blazed to life in her consciousness, as clear as if she could see their faces. Fear from the lesser lords, calculation from Aldrich, fury from Edmund, and from Constantine. A love so fierce it took her breath away. But there was something else, something that made her blood run cold. From Lord Aldrich came not just ambition, but satisfaction, as if events were unfolding exactly as he had planned. The rogue attack, Ava said suddenly, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, despite her never having projected it so far before. Lord Aldrich, you knew about the rogue attack on His Majesty before it happened. Every eye in the hall swung to her, then to Aldrich. The Lord's face remained perfectly composed, but Ava could feel the spike of alarm beneath his calm exterior. I beg your pardon? Aldrich said smoothly. I'm afraid I don't understand the accusation. You hired them, Ava continued, the certainty growing stronger as she spoke. You hired the rogues to attack the king, then came looking for him with a search party. You've been planning this confrontation from the beginning. Your Majesty, Aldrich said, turning to Constantine with an expression of wounded dignity. Surely you cannot give credence to the ravings of a disturbed Omega. The stress of her situation has clearly affected her mind. But Constantine was staring at Ava with dawning understanding. What else do you sense? He asked quietly. Poison, Ava whispered, the word torn from her throat. There's poison in the wine. The servants. Some of them aren't loyal. They've been bought. Chaos erupted anew, but this time it carried the sharp edge of genuine danger. Constantine's hand went immediately to his sword as guards moved to surround the royal dais. Lords throughout the hall began backing away from the tables, hands moving to their own weapons. How dare you? Aldrich began, but his protest was cut short as armed guards appeared in the doorway behind him. Not royal guards, Ava realized with growing horror. These men moved with the coordinated precision of professionals, and their loyalty clearly lay elsewhere. I'm afraid the time for subtlety has passed, Aldrich said, his mask of deference finally slipping away to reveal the calculating predator beneath. Your Majesty's attachment to this woman has provided the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the kingdom's need for more decisive leadership. Treason, Constantine snarled, his form beginning to blur as the wolf within strained for release. You dare commit treason in my own hall? I dare claim what should have been mine from the beginning, Aldrich replied coolly. A kingdom requires a king who puts duty before desire, tradition before the whims of a cursed Omega. The battle erupted with savage suddenness. Constantine's transformation was magnificent and terrible. The royal wolf stood nearly as tall as a man, his black fur seeming to absorb the torchlight. amber eyes blazing with fury. But he was outnumbered, Aldrich's conspirators revealing themselves throughout the hall. Ava found herself surrounded by chaos, the clash of steel, and the snarls of shifting wolves filling the air. But through it all, her newfound abilities allowed her to track every movement, sense every intention. She could feel Constantine's location even when he moved too fast for normal perception, could sense which guards remained loyal and which had been turned. "Behind you!" she called out as one of Aldrich's men crept toward Constantine's blind spot. The king spun, massive jaws closing around the attacker's sword arm before he could strike. "The poison!" she shouted over the din of battle. Lord Gareth drank from the tainted cup. "He's been affected." Indeed, the older lord was swaying on his feet, his movements sluggish as he tried to defend himself from one of the traitors. Constantine bounded across the room, driving off the attacker and steadying the poisoned lord. But the battle was far from over. More of Aldrich's forces poured into the hall, professional soldiers who had clearly been waiting for their moment. Ava realized with growing dread that this had been planned for months, every detail calculated to ensure success. "You cannot win, Constantine," Aldrich called out from his position near the high table, a crossbow now in his hands. "Even if you survive tonight, the kingdom will never accept your cursed mate. Better to end this now, with some dignity." The crossbow bolt flew straight and true, aimed directly at Constantine's heart. But Ava's heightened senses caught the motion, and without thinking, she threw herself forward. Pain exploded through her shoulder as the bolt found its mark, sending her crashing to the stone floor. Constantine's roar of fury shook the very walls of the ancient hall. The Alpha King's rage was a terrible thing to witness, a force of nature that scattered enemies like leaves before a hurricane. But it was Ava's cry of pain that truly unleashed the beast within him. What followed was less battle than massacre. Constantine moved through Aldrich's forces with methodical brutality, the royal wolf showing no mercy to those who had dared threaten his mate. The few conspirators who survived did so only by throwing down their weapons and begging for quarter. When the fighting finally ended, Lord Aldrich lay dead beneath the royal dais, his ambitions ended by the Alpha King's justice. The great hall was silent save for the groans of the wounded and the heavy breathing of exhausted survivors. Constantine, human once more, knelt beside Ava, where she lay bleeding on the stone floor. "You saved my life," he whispered, his hands gentle as they examined her wound. "We saved each other," she replied weakly, managing a smile despite the pain. "That's what mates do." "The claiming ritual," Constantine said urgently, looking around at the assembled nobility. Those who remained were loyal. The conspiracy had been crushed, the traitors revealed and dealt with. "We'll perform it tonight, before witnesses who cannot deny its validity." "Here? Now?" Ava asked, surprised. "Here and now," Constantine confirmed, "before all who would question our bond. Let them see that the moon goddess herself has chosen our path." And so it was that in the great hall of Ravenclaw Keep, surrounded by the aftermath of battle and the blood of traitors, Alpha King Constantine Ravenclaw claimed his mate in the sight of gods and men. The ancient ritual bound them together in ways that transcended politics or protocol, creating a bond that no human law could break. As their lips met in the sacred kiss that sealed their union, Ava felt her abilities surge to new heights. For one impossible moment she could see, not with her eyes, but with senses beyond the physical. She saw Constantine's love blazing like a star, saw the approval of the loyal lords, saw the bright future stretching ahead of them. The kingdom had its queen at last, and she would rule not despite her blindness, but because of the unique sight it had given her, the ability to see directly into the hearts of those she would serve. Chapter 8. Crown of Hearts. 6 months had transformed Ravenclaw Keep from a fortress of political intrigue into something that felt genuinely like home. As Ava stood before the great mirror in her chambers, Elena's gentle hands adjusting the final details of her coronation gown, she could hardly believe the journey that had brought her to this moment. "The silver embroidery catches the light beautifully, Your Majesty," Elena said, her voice warm with genuine affection. "Though I suppose you'll have to trust me on that detail. I can feel the weight of it," Ava replied, running her fingers over the intricate patterns that told the story of the kingdom in thread and precious metals. Every stitch represents something important, doesn't it? The wolves running through moonlight along the hem, Elena confirmed. The crown and roses at the bodice, and here, at the heart, she guided Ava's hand to her chest. 2 wolves intertwined, representing the unity of king and queen. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. Today's ceremony would make official what the moon goddess had decreed months ago in that forest clearing. Ava Whitmore, the blind Omega who had fled into the wilderness to escape a life of servitude, would become queen of all the wolf territories. "Are you nervous?" Elena asked, settling the delicate crown of silver and moonstones into Ava's carefully arranged hair. "Terrified," Ava admitted with a laugh, "but not about ruling. Constantine and I have been governing together for months now. The kingdom has accepted me, despite Lord Aldrich's predictions. It's the ceremony itself that makes me anxious. All those eyes watching, judging. My lady," Elena said gently, "there isn't a soul in this kingdom who doesn't see what you've accomplished. The peace treaties you negotiated with the Eastern Territories, the reforms that have improved life for Omegas across the realm, the way you've helped His Majesty become not just a strong king, but a compassionate one. They're not watching to judge. They're watching to celebrate." A knock at the chamber door interrupted them. "Enter," Ava called, recognizing Constantine's distinctive rhythm even before he spoke. "My queen," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "You look radiant." "How can you tell?" she teased, though her heart skipped at his words. "For all you know, I could be wearing my nightgown, because you always look radiant to me," Constantine replied, approaching to take her hands in his. "But today there's something extra. A glow that has nothing to do with silk and silver." Elena cleared her throat delicately. "I'll leave you two alone for a few minutes. The ceremony begins in an hour." When they were alone, Constantine guided Ava to sit beside him on the bench before her dressing table. "How are you feeling?" "Truly? Like I'm living someone else's dream," Ava said honestly. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That the terrified girl who ran into the forest is about to be crowned queen. She was never just a terrified girl," Constantine said firmly. "She was always a queen. She just needed the right circumstances to claim her throne." Ava felt the familiar flutter in her chest, the sensation that had been growing stronger over the past weeks. "Constantine, there's something I need to tell you. Something wonderful." She guided his hand to rest over her still flat abdomen, watching his face change as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" he asked, wonder making his voice rough. "Elena's healer confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a child." Ava's smile felt bright enough to illuminate the room. "An heir who will grow up knowing that love matters more than bloodlines. That strength comes in many forms." Constantine's response was to pull her into his arms, holding her with a reverence that spoke of how precious this news was to him. "The kingdom will be overjoyed," he murmured against her hair, "but not half as much as I am." "There's more," Ava said, leaning back to face him. "The child will be born with gifts," the healer says. "The combination of our bloodlines, enhanced by the mate bond. Our child will be able to see truth itself, to understand the hearts of others in ways that will make them a truly just ruler, like their mother already does," Constantine said, stroking her cheek with infinite gentleness. "You've transformed this kingdom, Ava. Not through force or political maneuvering, but by showing everyone what leadership looks like when it comes from the heart." The sound of horns echoing through the castle indicated it was time for the ceremony to begin. Constantine offered his arm, and together they made their way through corridors lined with subjects who had come from across the kingdom to witness their queen's coronation. The great hall had been transformed into something magnificent. Thousands of candles cast dancing shadows on the ancient stones, and the scent of roses and jasmine filled the air. Representatives from every territory had gathered, their voices joining in the ancient songs that welcomed a new queen. "Describe it to me," Ava whispered as they paused at the entrance to the hall. "Magic," Constantine replied simply. "Pure magic. The banners of all the territories hanging in harmony, nobles and commoners standing side by side, everyone united in celebration of their queen. The light from the candles makes everything glow gold, and at the far end, the ancient throne waits for you. They process down the aisle slowly, Ava's enhanced senses picking up the emotions of everyone they passed. Joy, hope, pride, love. The entire hall thrummed with positive energy that made her heart soar. These were her people now, and they truly had accepted her not despite her differences, but because of them. The coronation ceremony itself was both ancient and deeply personal. The high priest spoke words that had crowned queens for generations, but when Constantine placed the crown upon her head, his own words were added to the traditional ritual. By the grace of the moon goddess and the will of the pack, I crown thee Ava, queen of the wolves, my heart's choice and the kingdom's blessing. May your reign be long, and your wisdom light our path for generations to come. The crown settled onto her head with surprising lightness, as if it had been made specifically for her. In that moment, Ava felt the full weight of her transformation. From cast-off Omega to beloved queen, from powerless to influential, from alone to cherished by an entire kingdom. Rise, your majesty, the high priest intoned, and greet your people. The roar that went up from the assembled crowd was deafening. Cheers, applause, howls of celebration that seemed to shake the very foundations of the castle. Through her empathic abilities, Ava felt the genuine love and acceptance flowing from every corner of the hall. My people, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. 6 months ago, I was a lost soul wandering in darkness, both literal and figurative. Today, I stand before you not because of noble birth or political alliance, but because love conquered every obstacle placed in our path. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. I cannot see your faces, but I can feel your hearts. I know your hopes, your fears, your dreams for the future, and I promise you this. As long as I wear this crown, those dreams will be my priority. Every decision, every law, every policy will be guided by one simple question. How can we make life better for all our people? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through the mate bond, Ava could feel Constantine's pride and love wrapping around her heart, strengthening her for the challenges ahead. As the formal ceremony concluded and the celebration feast began, Ava found herself thinking about the forest clearing where their love story had truly begun. Tomorrow, she and Constantine would return there, not as refugees seeking shelter, but as king and queen honoring the place where fate had intervened in their lives. What are you thinking about? Constantine asked, as they sat at the high table, his hand resting over hers. About how different everything is now, yet how some things never change, Ava replied. You still describe beautiful things to me, still make me feel like the most important person in the world. Because you are, he said simply. Queen or no queen, crown or no crown, you're the center of my universe. Later that evening, as the last guests departed and the castle settled into peaceful quiet, Constantine and Ava stood on their private balcony overlooking the kingdom they now ruled together. The night air carried the scent of the forest beyond the walls, wild and free and full of promise. Do you ever regret it? Ava asked. Giving up the possibility of a political marriage, choosing love over strategy? Never, Constantine replied without hesitation. The kingdom is stronger because of you, not despite you. The territorial disputes that plagued my father's reign have been settled through your diplomatic gifts. The social reforms you've championed have improved life for thousands. You've made me not just a better king, but a better man. Ava leaned against his strong shoulder, her hand resting over the growing life within her. I love you, she said simply. For saving me in that forest, for seeing worth where others saw only deficiency, for believing that love could overcome every obstacle. I love you too, Constantine replied, his arm tightening around her. My queen, my mate, my heart's truest desire. Above them, the moon shone down on the kingdom they would rule together, its silver light blessing a love that had transformed 2 lives and would continue to transform many more. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in loneliness, but in pure joy at the rightness of the world. The blind queen and her wolf king, had found their happily ever after, and with it, had given their entire kingdom a brighter future. Sometimes, the most unlikely love stories became the most powerful forces for change, and in a forest clearing miles away, where their journey had truly begun, wildflowers bloomed out of season, as if the very earth was celebrating the miracle of two souls who had found each other in the darkness and brought light to an entire realm.